So I'd like to introduce Sonia Megalis. She's going to give our sort of keynote address this morning. She's coming to us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Sonia has worked with the Society of Jesus in Brazil for 41 years. She began as a teacher in 1975, and her professional road has been diverse, interesting, and challenging. From teaching kindergarten all the way through high school students, serving as the Dean of Pastoral Ministry, working at a Pedro Arrupe Research Center, being a principal, becoming executive director of the Jesuit Schools Network for the Central East Province, holding the post of national delegate for K-12 education, and finally returning to a school as president principal, the first layperson in just 150 years of the school history in Sao Paulo to hold such a post. Her experience is vast and deep. She has treasured stops for renewing, formation, and opening of her personal and professional world, living in Chile for a year to learn more about pastoral ministry work, back travel to several Latin American countries to learn about their educational systems and schools work, a 4-year period in Boston for a PhD at Boston College, and precious time of personal and academic development, and formal and systematic time dedicated to considering the questions facing education as she finds herself working again within our school system. Please welcome Sonia Megalis.
Good morning. Buenos dias. E bom dia. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, sharing some thoughts and reflections with such a qualified group of Nation educators. So I'd like to start by thanking you, Bill, for the invitation. I feel honored to be here. Thanks, Jeff and Tim, for all your support. I will start reading a small piece from a Mexican musician, I cannot sing, called Facundo Cabral. He wrote a song called Do Not Call Me a Foreign, No Me Llames Extranjero, one of the most touchable songs I've heard, especially during the different times I've been living abroad. I will say it first in Spanish and then in English. He says, No me llames extranjero porque haya nacido lejos o porque tenga otro nombre. No me llames extranjero porque haya sido otro el idioma de los cuentos. No me llames extranjero ni pienses de dónde vengo. Mejor saber dónde vamos. And now in English. Do not call me a foreign person because I was born overseas or because I have a different name. Do not call me a foreign person because children's stories have been told to me in another language. Do not call me foreign, nor think, where do I come from? Better know where we are going together. To start our conversation, I'd like to say that since my personal point of view, considering the challenges mentioned yesterday regarding refugees' experience, political tensions, economical breakdowns all over the world, the topic we have today is almost revolutionary for schools in general and a real challenge for Jesuit schools in particular. My presentation is organized considering both CPA's reflections and the Human Excellence document. In the 30 minutes I have to start this talk, I would like to highlight 3 points concerning the topic of educating competent men and women as global citizens. The first one, I believe that we should finally deal with the fact that we are talking about a complex task here. Educating competent men and women for us is more than preparing them to succeed individually in their adult lives, both professionally and personally. The concept of success itself should be revealed so we could tell kids a different story from that told to my generation and the following. It is about making our contribution to prepare young boys and girls to be able, and more important than that, to desire, to shape a more human society. Being successful in the current times is not an individual issue anymore, or something that can be achieved by ones regardless what happens to the rest of the world. We must succeed as humanity. We must succeed as societies. We must succeed as a school community and realize once for all that brightening alone, no matter how strong our light can be, will not help us tracking a better way. So educate kids to succeed is educate them to be part of creation, as Joe mentioned yesterday, and take care of it so it can be a place for all to succeed, including our Mother Earth. The second point we are going to develop is actually a question. Does educating competent students to become global citizens demand educators with sense and experience of global citizenship? This is not a rhetorical question. It's a real one that I would like to invite each of you to think about. Perhaps we can find some clues to a way of response. Third point touches something that has been said many times yesterday, especially during Chris' presentation. Educating students in a global citizenship perspective is part of our Jesuit tradition in education, because it is about exposing students to cross-cultural experiences. And this is, without a shadow, was what was in the heart of the first groups of Friends in the Lord experience it. Let's develop a little bit the first point. Why is it such a challenge, a complex task, and an opportunity to educate competent global citizenships? First of all, because we need to build common understanding about the word competence and its meaning. Competence can be such a polyphonic word, meaning different things as we change from context to context. And even in the same context, depending on what we have as academic background and personal history, we can have a different understanding of what it is. It's not rare that talking to a group of educators in the same school, perhaps working at the same level, we can recognize in their discourse different tones, expectations, and as a consequence, different ways to transmit that to students. So let's think together about this as a challenge. How will kids build a sense of competence if they get different and sometimes even opposite signs from their educators? Without more digressions, we can go back to Father Arupe and learn about what is not a competent person in his understanding. I just read this quote from the speech Our Schools Today and Tomorrow. And he says, "The ideal of our schools is not to produce little academic monsters, dehumanized and introverted. Neither it is to produce pious faithful, allergic to the world in which they live, incapable of responding to it sympathetically. Our ideal is much closer to the unsurpassed model of the Greeks in its Christian version, balanced, serene, and constant, open to whatever is human." Close quote. We probably have in this formulation a sort of anticipation of what we worked during CPA back in 2014. We are talking about the 4 or 5 C's, but remarking here that the global citizen we want to help families to educate is not a sum of the C's, but the integration of all of them. And to do so, there will not a first or a correct or a best start point or C. We can have kids, for example, exposed to academic experiences as the key in which conceptual knowledge works as the key to open their minds. And from that starting point, we can lead them to recognize other kinds of movements that information provoke. Feelings, thoughts, desires, hopes, etc. Just to pose a very simple example, it would demand that history teachers present content material in a rigorous way, but as a phenomena, not as a sequence of facts, as a multi-vision and multi-perspective history, not as a one-vision storytelling. Here lies an important part of the challenge, in my personal opinion. If we could guarantee that the sum of every single C would put together a global citizen, it would be probably easy. I cannot talk about the work you are doing in the US, but looking back to the Jesuit schools in Brazil, I would say that some of them make a great job on each C, but none of the 14 schools in Brazil can guarantee that kids will leave this school after being there for 12, 13 years, capable to connect or to integrate skills and knowledge of all orders that are implicit in each C. It is not uncommon in our schools to hear that we want to educate competent, compassive, committed students, and also, and here comes a list of attitudes and behaviors that we tend to add to the C's as if they were not part of them. Sometimes I think that we are facing now the same challenge we did when Inertian pedagogic paradigm came out. It is the 4 or 5 C's framework enough to give us a secure path to do what we have to do? This question has been posed back in 1993 when we had the Nation Paradigm document too. My belief is that I do not think so. All the contrary. I believe that the main message in the Human Excellence document is that we should take the risk of being prophetic again in our work as educators. While we keep looking for security to start putting this call in practice, in my very humble opinion, we have a long way ahead to understand what is it about. Let's develop a little bit the second point. Schools that educate students with a sense of global citizenship necessarily migrate its focus from teaching to learning. Important to note that when reversing these factors, the task of teaching remains relevant and perhaps even more demanding for teachers. However, by placing learning at the center of the process, the task and the adventure of learning stops being exclusive of the student and becomes a teacher's task as well. The second point is mainly about ourselves. And here I wish we should have it clear that being shaped as a global citizen is not only about how many foreign languages we can speak or how many different places we visited or lived in. That said, the question would be about how open are we to learn from different cultures. And being as honest as I can this morning, my answer is yes. Educating students for global citizenship demands educators with minimum sense and experience of what is it to be shaped as a global citizen. Said in a different way, what is it like not to be native? How is it like to be a foreign person, even in your own country? I can tell you, it's not about being proficient in different languages. It is not about traveling all over the world. It can help, and sometimes it really does. But these are not the core of the experience. The core of the experience is the core itself. St. Ignatius would leave us with this great axiom: feelings can move or generate thoughts that lead to action. So, as said yesterday, I would like to invite you to open our hearts to know, to appreciate, and to love different people, different tastes of food, different ways of living, different dress codes, different view of lives, expanding by talking and listening to people who live on the other side, wherever it is, and be touched deep enough to critically reflect on our own. The point is that learning coming from cross-cultural shaped experiences are more alike to educate competent global citizens than others. And here comes one brief personal sharing about my experience of being shaped as a global citizen. I still lifelong work in progress, and I believe it will be until the very last day of my life. So please give me your permission to share one of my experiences in this country back in the 1999 actually, as a PhD student at Boston College. During 4 years, I had a chance and the privilege to meet people from different continents, as well as the native students over there. 2 of the international ones, both from Africa, became good friends of mine. Sister Liderata and Thomas, she from Zambia and he from Congo. I used to look at them, certainly without that contemplation eyes that Chris mentioned yesterday, and think that they were different from me including. And it should be more difficult for them rather than for me to be an international school in such a local environment. Sister Liderata and Thomas had a more strong accent, believe me. I would think at that time. Besides, they were from Africa, and all other sort of prejudice thoughts that I will not share with you now. One day, we went out for lunch, and I was complaining so hard about the director of my PhD program, about food, living, people, everything in Boston, the cold weather, everything. They were listening very careful, and without notice, Sister Liderata interrupted me and said, and I quote, "You know what your problem is, Sonia? You probably never experienced it. What is it like to be part of a minority? But here, my friend, you are part of our group, and we are no more than 4% of the whole student population at BC. No matter how blonde you are, when you say your name and have to spell it so natives can understand, no matter you being more fluent than us and getting better grades, you are still thinking and talking from a place completely unknown by the majority of our professors. And at the end," she kept saying, "you will have to prove that you are smart enough to have the privilege to be here, coming from a third world country, as well as Thomas and I will." And she finished it, "Look at us, Sonia, and look at the mirror. You are in deep need of reference." Close quote. When I come here this morning, I experience again similar feelings, tension, insecurity, and this will happen every single time that I leave my comfort zone in my own country. I feel lack of skills, a poor domain of vocabulary than what I would consider good enough to respond to the invitation I've got. So why do I accept it? I accept it basically for two reasons. First, because if I am working as president in a school that should challenge kids with experiences of this type, I should do it myself. Otherwise, I will not be able to guide them through the beautiful path of uncertainty and learning from different cultures. And at the end, being here in the US so many times, still feeling tension, uncertainty, especially when I have to be exposed to this audience, I come here and I see Mike here in some place, my colleague at BC. I meet Brian, an Irish Jesuit with whom I have been in Marisa. I've got a huge hug from Joe Carver yesterday, as if we were best friends forever. I recognize faces from the last colloquium at St. Louis. A bunch of different encounters that confirm that no matter how nervous I am about being competent enough to do this presentation, what really matters is that there is joy in my heart. I feel more secure and less nervous because I can look at these faces. So it's worth it again to take the risk once more. Second reason, as important as the first one, I accepted it because there is no chance that I go back home as I left. There are always memories of all types to be integrated as learning that will shape my professional and personal being. So day by day, experience by experience, we can open ourselves to be transformed by this wonderful global perspective. It can happen through an experience in our own country, as Chris mentioned yesterday, knowing and learning from people of different backgrounds. It can be through more radical and demanding ones. I cannot finish this sharing part without pointing out that becoming a global citizen is taking the risk to live with a permanent lacking soul. There will be always something missed, even when we cannot name it. And that's what makes us pilgrims. And that's what makes us walk around physically, with our imagination, with our heart, anyway. Finally, but not less relevant, third point is that it is no more a choice. Educated, competent global citizens is an imperative of social justice and environmental responsibility. Besides, as pointed out at the beginning of this presentation, Jesuit education is started in different points of the world, with the first ones being sent to totally different cultures and working hard to learn from that people and from their way of living. Clear enough about the end of their mission, each of them, Francis Xavier, Matteo Ricci, Manuel da Nóbrega, Anchieta, just some of them, had been competent enough to learn about the context and integrate in their educational or pastoral work what was essential for those communities. What did make those men capable of that? Their studies at the University of Paris perhaps helped somehow. But I would risk saying that what made them capable of doing that kind of immersion was their spiritual experience of being accepted and loved by God in their singularity. Already said, but never too much to repeat, diversity should become personal and daily basis experience in the schools. We have a long and important task revisiting and reorganizing curriculum, academic contexts, instructional materials, and technological resource, so we can move from local frameworks to global ones as we educate these kids. And folks, we are the biggest educational network in the world. Let's work hard and hope we can become a global one too. We have all the resources. Let's use them. We have a responsibility leading these girls and boys in this beautiful adventure of becoming a competent, compassionate, committed, and creative person, using all they have received to shape a different society. Otherwise, we will keep addressing the wrong message, no matter how many social programs or spiritual exercise we provide to them. Thank you very much for your kind and generous attention.